my brief background, I've got a fairly heavy digital footprint, so you can have a look if you're interested in learning more about me. But very briefly, I'm an entrepreneur turned intrapreneur turned agile coach. And what I want to do today is I want to share a journey with you guys. I want to talk to you guys about open source, agile, and cloud, and being human. So the journey goes like this. In 2010, I had a thought. A few things led to that thought, but the thought was about investigating application of cloud, open source principles, agile values and principles in making a difference in society. Because we take these things and we go into enterprises and we transform enterprises, we transform individuals, we transform teams. But the thought was, can it be used to transform something more complex than an enterprise? So there are a couple of things that came to mind. One was, could the agile principles and values be used to transform society? And the second one was, could people be empowered to write and own their own narrative of change? Because that's the most compelling thing in society, is our ability as individuals to effect change, not only for ourselves, but for our family, our community, and those around us. So, fast forward to December 2016. I'm going to tell you about a lady called Komal. So we were running experiments in Karachi in Pakistan, and in December we met this young lady. She was a beautician with a small family. She lived in a joint family system. She was a small contributor towards her household income. It was herself and her husband who were the main breadwinners. And her contribution was quite tiny, but nonetheless it mattered. And then nonetheless it was essential for her to go out and earn as well, so that the household had enough income to survive on. And they're dependent, as a family, they were dependent on short-term loans, or what we call payday loans. And payday loans the world over are the same, right? The interest rate is extortionate, and they're there for a reason. They're essentially loan sharks, because in that part of the world, you don't have regulated payday loans. So she was hardworking, but in a bit of a bother, in terms of her progress as a human being, her progress as a contributor to her family, her progress as a family. So we started working with Komal in January 2017. So we have a mini MBA program. I'll tell you more about it in a minute. And then we followed that up with coaching and mentoring. So in our first month, so we had no baseline, financial baseline to go with. So in the first month we worked with Komal. We got her to keep her accounts, and we arrived at a baseline with her. And she was earning less than 50 cents a month. Now, any part of the world, 50 cents a month doesn't really carry you a long way, regardless of exchange rate fluctuations. In the second month, we saw progress. She started earning a little bit more. Her revenue went up. And in the third month, we had a 3-month engagement with her. In the third month, she was earning more than €1 a day. Just a tiny bit more than €1 a day. But the difference it made to her family was phenomenal. Her revenue went up by 17%. Her profitability went up by 121%. Now, imagine if you were a small business or you're an enterprise with that kind of change within 3 months. That'd be quite phenomenal. I think any small business that would achieve that in 3 months would probably be, particularly a tech business, would probably be in the newspapers, but not her. After 3 months, she's still a beautician, and even now she's still a beautician, but she's a significant contributor to her family. She's moved all from contributing less than 50 cents a month to a little over €1 a month. She's less dependent on short-term loans. Yeah, she's still dependent on short-term loans, but she's less dependent on short-term loans. She's financially included. She's paid off some of her short-term loans through savings, and she's growing her business. But most importantly, what it's done to her self-esteem as a woman, as a mother, as a daughter-in-law, as a wife, as an individual, is phenomenal. Just meeting her and talking to her in December, and then in March and April, you could see the stark contrast between where she was and where she is. Her as-was state and as her desired state. You could just see the ambition and the human being come to life within her. And also more importantly, it got a greater respect from her family. So previously it was about, why do you have to work? That question disappeared because whatever you're doing is contributing significantly. And you can see that it can only get better because she's got the skills to do so. Excuse me, and she's got the self-confidence to do so. Cole's not alone. Over 6 years, we worked with 683 direct beneficiaries. So what we do is we take them through a mini MBA program, which is essentially a very, very stripped down MBA. It's over 5 days, 2 hours every evening. We teach them the basics of running a business, the basics of being a good owner-manager. And then we follow that up with coaching and mentoring and then group workshops so that we can keep reiterating the knowledge that's been taught in the classroom back at their place of work. And on average, we've seen 35% growth in revenue and 72% growth in profitability with each one of these businesses. And our engagement lasts between 3 to 6 months, depending on how well the recipient absorbs and applies the knowledge that we're teaching them. So if they're slow starters, we stay with them for a little longer, but if they're early adopters and they're really gung-ho about it and they catch on quickly, then we just spend 3 months with them and then we move along to someone else. Overall, indirectly, we benefited just over 5,000 people, excluding those 683. This is the average family size of that part of the world is 6.5. So this is the families that have benefited from it. So this journey, we call it, the vehicle for this journey is Peace Through Prosperity, which is a charitable organization. You can learn more about it over here. But the thing is, how did we get here? Now, how did we arrive at this point? How did we figure out what needs to be done? How did we experiment with what needs to be done? That journey is about cross-pollination. It's about taking what we know about digital transformation and then taking it out of its tech realm and applying it for social transformation. So it's not about technology, but it's about the principles and the values that we live and breathe as technologists these days. It's about taking those and applying it to a more complex system and seeing what happens. The journey started in 2010. So when the journey started, it was the first year and a half, nearly 2, were all about discovery. And the only way I knew how to discover how was empathy mapping. The primary research for us as technologists usually starts with, what do you want? Why do you want it? You know, what's the value that you're going to get out of it? You know, why do you seek the changes you do? What is your current state? And many times our own customers don't understand their current state because they're so focused on where they want to go, they don't really know whether they're standing on the edge of the cliff or whether they're already flying. So we used an empathy-driven approach to discovery. To my knowledge, it's the largest empathy mapping exercise carried out. We did just over 400 empathy maps with 400 plus people, mostly micro-entrepreneurs, mostly in the cobbler business. So these are guys who would shine shoes on street corners, or fix shoes or bags or leather goods on street corners. Then we said, okay, now we've got some personas, now we've got some inkling, we've got a deeper understanding of what is it that is bothering these people, what is it that is the primary pain for these people, what is it that is driving these people to be more and more isolated as a community, more and more towards the right as opposed to towards the center. And we said, okay, what we're going to do is, now that we know their pains, we're going to apply some design thinking and we're going to come up with some experiments to run with these guys. We said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to take a small sample and we're going to see what we can do with these guys that will help them get from A to B. For us, it was all about starting with financial inclusion, about putting more money in their pockets, because if they can't eat or feed their family, they're not off Maslow's pyramid. They're still stuck on the bottom. And if they're not off the bottom, There's no point talking to them about their worldviews. There's no point talking to them about society or a community as a large, because they sleep hungry. There's nothing else that's going to motivate them. Then we said, okay, how do we then deliver this? So we trained a team up using Scrum and Kanban frameworks, and we said, okay, our delivery is going to be agile driven as well. So we're going to use Scrum, we're going to use Kanban where appropriate, and again, it was about teaching the team, the field team, and mind you, the field team, they were not technologists. I was working with a field team of 11 guys, of which 2 had degrees, bachelor's degrees, and the rest hadn't even finished high school. But they were literate, and they were eager to learn something completely different and new. So taught them the frameworks, taught them the tools and the techniques, and then let them pull. So it wasn't a case of me saying, you have to do a daily stand-up. It was a case of the teams themselves saying, you know what, before we go out in the field every morning, we should just align, all 11 of us, because we're heading into 12 different neighborhoods. And they're all pretty hot neighborhoods, because we work primarily in conflict-affected communities. So they're not easy places to work in. So it'd be good to align in the morning. It'd be good to spend an hour or two just reflecting back every 2 weeks on how things went for us. Did they go well? Did they not go well? Did anyone feel threatened or in harm's way? And how do we improve our next 2 weeks? So they started doing retrospectives themselves as well. That was about scaling. So we're like, okay, how do we scale this stuff? Because we validated it, Coleman's story, the mini MBA works. We spent 3 to 6 months with them. And guess what? Change happens. They make more money. When they make more money, they can feed their family. They can save some money. When they can save some money, they can send their kids to better schools, or at least to a school, because a lot of these people, they can't afford to send them to schools either. So change is happening, but how do we scale it? That's where we leaned on open source. We're open source people. The most obvious thing to scale something was to just throw it out there. Give it to the community, validate it, and put it out there. And when we started Peace Through Prosperity, that was the whole notion that we wanted to be an innovation lab where we take our knowledge, our expertise, and our skills as enterprise coaches, as enterprise transformation agents, and apply that to social transformation, come up with some experiments, validate those experiments, and then open source them for the world to use. Over the course of the last 8 years, we've run 16 major experiments. 4 of them succeeded. The others failed, but we learned a lot from them. Of the 4 that succeeded, we took 2 to market. Why? Because they were viable to take to market. The other 2 were not so viable, even though they succeeded. They're not scalable experiments. But over the same course, we conducted 600 plus minor experiments. It's all about experimentation. And we roped our people in, our beneficiaries, our participants in those experimentations, and we taught them that mindset that, look, the question would always be, okay, I'll spend 5 days with you, 2 hours each day. I'm giving my time up. It's going to cost me some money. We're going to lose some revenue. What am I going to get out of it? We don't know. It's an experiment. Let's see what happens. What's the worst that can happen? You just learn something new. Maybe you can't apply it to your business, and maybe you can. So come on the first day. Tell you what, do an experiment with us. Come on the first day. Spend 2 hours. We'll give you some tea and chocolates and biscuits. And if you get benefit from that first evening, come the next day. And if you get benefit from the next evening, come the third day. It's just 5 days. It's 10 hours. We have a dropout rate of less than 10%. Because whatever we do with them on the first day, the second day, the third day, the fourth or the fifth day, we ensure that the next morning when they go to work, they can make more money than they did yesterday, if they apply what's being taught. And what we teach is very pragmatic. So it's simple for them to go and then apply what's being taught. And when they apply what's being taught, guess what? They make more money. And they realize they've made more money because we give them a little register and we say, you guys got to keep accounts. Because without accounts, without metrics, we can't measure you, you can't measure yourself, and we can't forward plan. So they always come back on the second day and we asked them, how did the experiment go? And they go, well, we're here. It works. Second, third day, same question. How did it go? And then those who drop out, we follow up with them and we ask them, why did you drop out? And mostly it's nothing to do with the fact that they didn't make more money. It was either because they decided to change their trade, they decided to pivot as a business, or they decided they had some family issues they couldn't attend. And in some cases, they were thinking we were going to give them a wad of cash, because that's what development usually is, right? You go in and you give things. You go to a farm, you give them tools, you give them seeds, you give them a loan to buy a tractor. Something like this, a few people think they'll come to it and they'll get money at the end of it. They find out, well, they don't get money. But the funny thing is, we had some people come and tell us with our beneficiaries, why didn't they attend? And one of them did say that, I thought I was going to get cash, I got none. And the audience just kind of laughed at them and said, we're getting something better than cash. You know, it's the equivalent of being taught how to fish as opposed to being given fish. So to what end? So to what end are we doing all of this? You know, what are the outcomes that we are seeing come out of it? It's poverty alleviation for a start. Our journey started with de-radicalization. That was our initial focus. How do we de-radicalize marginalized communities? How do we turn people away from extremism? What we found out was one of the root causes of all marginalization and isolation of communities is inequality and poverty. You know, because money can buy you equality. We all know that, right? That's why they're called the privileged. So if we can take them out of poverty, we can head them towards equality. You know, even if it's not state-sponsored or society-sponsored equality, as we know here, fortunately, at least they can start earning their way towards it. Then we found out it's about economic development, it's about entrepreneurship development, it's about skills development. It's about social mobility. We've got beneficiaries who have moved out of their shanty towns into slightly better surroundings. We've got beneficiaries who've taken their kids out of state schools or religious schools and put them into private schools. You know, obviously not the best in the world, but what they can afford. But at least they can now afford to do so. It's about social mobility. It's about taking them away from that poverty trap and putting them on a path to progress, handing them over the control, the reign, the keys of their own future with the skills and saying, you know what, you can do it. You don't need to buy into anyone else's narrative of change. That's what we do in organizations, right? We go in as transformation agents and we pitch them a narrative of change, how we can facilitate them to get somewhere else. But the key is to get them to believe that they themselves are the catalysts and the facilitators. We're just there with a beacon or a torch just to show them the way, to teach them a few tools and techniques and just guide them. The rest is really up to them. The key was, for us, the aim was, as I said, de-radicalization, but also social transformation. Because though we started from that very narrow view of how do we de-radicalize individuals who are marginalized, how do we turn people away from extremism, then we found out that our experiment to do so has a way wider remit than that narrow cast. So we started broadcasting. We said, okay, our remit now is social transformation, these experiments work. Then we open sourced it, obviously. I want you guys to pause for a second and just reflect on that. And most of us are agilists in some way, shape, or form over here. We're all in the open source community. We're all familiar with cloud. And just reflect on taking stuff out of our realm and putting it in the non-technical realm. And reflect on the impact that a few experiments have had. And reflect on what could you do in your own communities? What could you do in your own street, in your own neighborhood, in your own countries, or on the planet, to take what you have as individuals, as teams and organizations, and take it across outside of our bubble. So we think we are onto something. Do you guys agree we're onto something? Yeah? But we need help. We need a lot of help. But first thing we need is for people to go out and spread the word and steal our stuff. So when we engaged with NGOs and international development organizations, even today the hardest thing is to explain to them what open source means. That's the hardest thing. Because they have this deep-rooted anxiety about free stuff. You know, nothing is free in this world. So when we say our programs are free, the support for it is free. They just don't get it, the majority of them. Some of them do. You know, a small minority gets it. Not immediately, but after a little while they go, yeah, that kind of makes sense. You know? So the first thing for us is we tell people, so we stopped using the word open source. We just said, just steal our stuff. Come talk to us and we'll give you the keys. Just come and help yourself. You know, they're like, how much does it cost? Well, if you're stealing it, it doesn't cost you anything, does it? You know, and that language resonated with them. And we found that there were NGOs and small grassroots activist organizations who come to our website and download the material. And then when we follow them up saying, hey, we saw you downloaded our material, it's like, no, we didn't. We're just checking it out. So it's an interesting journey trying to get into the individuals and organizations to learn about what open source means outside of tech, because essentially these are just documents, right? There's a process behind it. There's a manual, and it's a playbook, nothing more. You know, so it's not something that you could protect in the same way as, say, you could protect software. But then we don't want to do that. So what we want to do is ask you guys to take the message, spread it, go to our site, download the material. If you have time, help translate it. If you work with NGOs, and a lot of us in the open source space do, then talk to the NGOs, send them to our site, tell them to explore. Because our aim is to complement what they're doing. That was another big thing was, why should we take your programs? Well, because they're complementary to the work that you currently do. So we're working with one NGO in Bangladesh who's free industrial slaves. So I got told a story about an 28-year-old individual who was sold to a factory when he was 8, and he was freed at 28. Never saw the outside world, just saw the inside of a factory for 20 years. When they freed this individual, they gave him a business to run. Cart, fruits and veggies, go make a living, make a life. The guy's know nothing about the world. So how is he going to go out and sell stuff? So that's where our program comes in. It complements the work that they're doing. Why? Because our work is all about creating micro-entrepreneurs, better owner-managers of the businesses that they currently have. It's not about setting them up with a new business, but teaching them how to make their current businesses grow and perform better. The other stuff is funding. Spread the word. Our annual budget is quite tiny because we run a very lean shop. You know? And of the 40,000 euros that we currently need on an annual basis, we already raised 13.5, and hopefully that'll become 16.5 by the end of the week. That's because our first and only corporate sponsor is Belgium-based. You guys probably know this company, Drop Solid. They're our first corporate sponsor. So, to the rest of the sponsors, you should go and name and shame them, right? You say, hey, you guys should sponsor this because there's a Belgian agency that has the foresight to see where we want to go. And they see these individuals. One of the best things I like about the sponsorship we have from Drop Solid is the shared vision. They see these guys as their future customers. They're small businesses now, but at some point they won't be. Right? So that shows you the longevity of their vision, which is aligned with our own, that one day these micro-entrepreneurs will be far from micro-entrepreneurs. And we've seen that happen currently. I have another story that I usually share about a barber called Anwar. we met him, he had a half-broken mirror nailed to a wall, and he was paying rent for a nail to the shop that the wall belonged to. And he had a broken chair, dirty towels, and he was a barber. Well, that is when we met him. 9 months into the journey, and we spent 9 months with this guy, he had a shop. He had a shop with 4 third, fourth hand barber seats. His shop actually looked like a salon, looks like a salon. He employs 4 people from within his community. So compared to Como, his transformation is nearly unbelievable. Because he's gone from a broken mirror, one guy who was a sole trader for 8 years. For 8 years he was there, that wall, that chair. 9 months later, he was a role model for his own community. And those success stories attract a lot more people towards us. Because for us, one of the most difficult things is mobilization. Because when we go into a marginalized community and we say, come work with us, there's a lot of deep-rooted suspicion. Why should we work with you? Who finances you? What are your aims? You know, you get all sorts of absurd comments and questions. But then you create a success story from their community and put it out there. The people who know Anwar, for instance, they're like, dude, what happened? Did you win the lottery? Did you start dealing? What happened? You know, met you within a year, you're a bona fide businessman, as opposed to that guy we used to poke fun at with the broken chair and the broken mirror. And then he tells his story, and then those micro-entrepreneurs, they in turn come and say to us, what about us? Teach us. And a lot of things we do, we try and get the knowledge spread by osmosis. So for instance, another experiment we're running is we're creating a graphic novel. So we thought about scalability. We were like, okay, so we need to scale, we need local partners, NGOs to come and pull. Again, agile, right? We don't want to push. We want them to pull on our material and go and use it. And then we found out that they're not really pulling. Obviously disappointed us because we want to see the world change for a better place tomorrow. We don't want to wait for 100 years. We're pragmatic, we know it's going to take centuries, but we'd like it to happen tomorrow, right? So like, how do we get them to pull if they're not pulling? We said, okay, how do we push without pushing? And I was like, hey, let's experiment with a graphic novel. Everyone likes reading a graphic novel, right? So a graphic novel that tells the story of a few entrepreneurs and what they were taught, how they run their businesses, and see what happens. That's in the Pipeworks. Then the other thing is we're heading to Yemen. Yemen's quite topical, right? You guys are hearing about it in the news. For the past few weeks, it's been continuously in the news because for some reason our government suddenly wanted to stop the war there. You know, previously we were, even still now, we're happy selling arms and weapons to countries that bomb Yemen, but suddenly we want to stop it from happening. We've been trying to get into Yemen for a couple of years now, but only recently did we make good headway. And we partnered up with a local organization, and now surprisingly, the local organization we partnered with is a tech organization. You know, there are a bunch of techies who've come together to provide an alternative access to the internet because the state access is gone. There is no state. There's a civil war in that country. So they've come together and said, look, we still need access to the internet. Our people still need access to the internet. So let's make it happen. And hats off to these guys. They made it happen. Then we got in touch with them. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. So we're currently building a team out in Yemen, and you know, touch wood, hopefully, we'll be starting a project there in January. And next day if I'm here, I'll tell you guys how it went. Hi. So, to kind of close off, okay, that disappeared. To kind of close off, just want to say, take the message, spread the word, you know, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, and see what you can contribute. You know, just spreading the word is contribution enough as far as I'm concerned. But if you can spare more time, then do so. You know, for instance, if you speak another language, like me, I speak just English, help us translate the material. If you know someone who can, do that. We're looking for translators in Spanish, we're looking for translators in Portuguese. We've got the material being translated into Bulgarian, we've got the material translated into Arabic, obviously for Yemen. We've got the material translated into a few languages, but we're looking to spread that. If you know of graphic artists who'd be willing to donate their time to just soundboard developing a graphic novel, for instance, you know, that kind of stuff, that goes a long way. And a lot of this stuff that we've done is mostly contribution from the open source community. You know, technical contribution as well as non-technical contribution. Thank you very much for your time. I hope this resonates with you. And if you guys have any questions, yes, please.
So, out of your 16 major experiments, I was wondering what were the exact reasons why 12 of them failed?
Lack of experience, for one. We're not from the development world. My team, well, the two key spearheads at the charity are myself and my wife. So I'm a technologist from my background. My wife's a lawyer. We had no idea what we were doing. We just wanted to do something. We wanted to make a positive impact, but what do? We had no idea. So one of the experiments that we conducted, and it miserably failed, was what we call the urban garden, or the kitchen garden. And that was about providing food security to these families in shanty towns by providing them with plant boxes to grow their own vegetables. What we didn't count on was the fact that there are times of the month when these guys don't have clean water to drink, let alone put clean water in the plants. So when we found out there was a drought, we gave them bottles of mineral water. Guess what they did with the mineral water? They drank the mineral water. And they put seawater in the plants, neutralized the soil. So, for instance, inexperience is one of the reasons. The other was, you could say, lack of scalability. So it is much easier, for instance, to run an experiment with a small group of people confined to a semi-urban setting, but when you take it into an urban setting, suddenly it's not so scalable. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Please.
And the let's say you told that you were able, let's say, to scale to open source. One is mini MBA.
Yep, one's the mini MBA, and the other one is the coaching and consulting that follows on from the mini MBA. So, having gone to business school myself, I knew that just getting the books, reading the material, sitting the exams doesn't give me the knowledge that I need to practically apply it. And what sets a good business school from every other average business school is their follow-up. So every good MBA these days, or for the past couple of decades, comes with a follow-up mentoring or a coaching of a cohort. So they'll take 10, 15 individuals, usually within a particular vertical, and they'll assign a tutor to them and say, this guy is going to be your mentor and your coach for the next 6 months, and he's going to help you implement your business plan. And then you meet up with this individual on a monthly basis, and they do help you implement the business plan. For us, it was the same. We're like, okay, so we ran an experiment, mini MBA, it works, brilliant. We co-designed it with 5, then we moved to 25, and then after 25, we wanted to make the leap to 100. And with the 100, we did the A/B testing. So we said 50 we're going to just teach, and 50 we're going to teach, coach, and mentor and see what happens. And the result was, it kind of like, it was obvious to us that just teaching isn't working. And we saw that result within 1 month, that the guys that we were coaching were making, their progress was leaps and bounds ahead of the guys we weren't coaching. So in the second month, the guys we weren't coaching pulled. And they said, hang on a second, this doesn't sound really fair because you just taught us. We're spending time with those guys. When are you going to spend time with me? We're like, right now. Any other questions? Cool. So again, pull on it, see how you can contribute, see how this can complement some of the stuff you may be doing or some of your clients and NGOs may be doing.
The other, since I have time, the other interesting thing that has happened over the years is coming back. It's like a full circle. So whatever I knew as a catalyst, as a coach, as a agile scrum master, product owner in the enterprise space that I took across for social transformation, I learned tons more over here because this environment was purely experimental for me. You know, we ran wild experiments without any, I don't want to say without any rules, but without any consequences that you have in organizations. Like in organizations, I can't just go and run an experiment willy-nilly, right? I have to sell it to someone. In this case over here, I could just run experiments with my team and see what happens. Whatever I learned here, now I find myself bringing it back into my world as an agile coach in the enterprise space. And there are a few things that kind of I can distill down. The first one is uniqueness, right? So when I say we ran 600 plus experiments, guess what? We ran about 683 experiments to be precise. Because every engagement with every individual micro-entrepreneur, be it a man or a woman, is different. We have to tailor and adapt our approach based on their very uniqueness. And that's something I learned and I brought back into the enterprise space. What I brought back is every individual is unique, regardless of them being a business analyst or a project manager or a one of 100 developers or one of 100 program managers. You have to develop empathy with that individual in order to be a true catalyst of change for that individual. So coming back to it, it's about getting the individual to buy and own the narrative of change. So as change agents, you know, the only change I want to make is the change within the individual and give them that self-belief and the reassurance that this transformation is going to be good for me, it's going to be good for my team, it's going to be good for my enterprise, it's going to be good for the ecosystem, it's going to be good for the industry. But I'm responsible for that change. The other thing was working with them in their shoes. So it's not a case of just going and saying, look, this is how it's done. I've given you a 2-day course on how to be a Scrum Master. Good luck. It doesn't work that way. What we learned with these guys, again, outside of tech, was you have to walk with them. So it's about teach, show, do. You know, so for instance, I co-run sprints with my new teams in the enterprise. Why? Because that's exactly what my team does over there, is they go and co-run their business with them when they're out there coaching and mentoring them. So for instance, when we're teaching them better customer relationship management, you've got to appreciate that these guys have had very hard upbringings, right? So they're like brought up on the street, so they don't have the finesse of being able to communicate or being able to charm every single person they meet. So the conversations are very harsh and abrupt and sometimes, you know, just rude. So for instance, observed this myself, customer approaches a fruit vendor, you know, and he's like, hey, and the guy's like, what? And you're like, dude, that conversation just died there. You know, any opportunity to build a relationship just died. So greet the guy with a smile. Say, hey, how you doing, man? How's your day? What do I hear about his day? It's like, dude, everyone's having a hard day, right? Do you want to make more money? Yeah, be nice to people. You know, you bring that back into the enterprise space, which is you co-work with them. You don't just say, this is how you plan a sprint, go plan a sprint. You sit down and you plan the sprint with them. Why? They're doing this for the first time. So don't let them do it, just do it for them, with them. And then the next sprint, let them do it. And then just be there as a coach to make sure that they're doing it correctly. And if not, just guide them on how to do it. So it's about empathy. It's about walking with them in their shoes. It's about recognizing the uniqueness of individuals and respecting that uniqueness. So it's not about saying, okay, you know what, you're the DevOps team, so I'm going to put you in this bucket that's called how I coach and train DevOps. No, you're an individual. Your emotional intelligence is very different from your emotional intelligence. I am going to take that into consideration when I communicate with you, when I spend time with you. It takes longer to build relationships with some people than others. So as a coach, when I go in, I try and spend as much time initially as I can sitting and working amongst the people I'm going to train and coach and help transform. Why? Because they need to know me as a human being before they trust me as an agent of change. Because guess what? I'm an alien to them. You know, I'm just some guy who's been hired probably by the digital department or someone up there to change them. And no one likes change. You know, let's face it. As creatures, we don't particularly like change. I'm a change agent, and I don't like change. It took me almost a year to agree to moving houses with my wife. Yeah, even though I know that has to happen, but I dragged it as much as I could. Why? Because I didn't think it was a priority. It was. But you eventually do change if you see the value in it. And it's about getting people to see the value in it. So when we go and talk to these communities, we don't go and say, hey, you're radical, I'm going to de-radicalize you. It doesn't work that way. You have to build a relationship. And then they themselves say, look, I am sick and tired of what's going on in my life. I'm sick and tired of the fact that there is no state help. I'm sick and tired of the fact that there's no opportunity. I'm sick and tired of everything. That's the point where you know you have their attention because they've just opened up to you. And that's the opportunity you have to say, well, tell you what, I can equip you with tools and techniques and a mindset where you don't have to be sick and tired. You can just take the reign and control of your own life. You don't need someone else's narrative. So if you look at how the right is rising and how populism or nationalism is rising, it's because people want change. Everyone wants change. I want change, right? But governments are failing to deliver that change. So there's a void. Someone comes and fills that void with their own narrative. You know, be it a fascist movement or be it a religious movement, be it, you know, Pegida or be it Daesh or ISIS, they have the same narrative. So if you look at history, how populism works, how nationalism works, how mass movements are created, they take away the self. That's one of the things they do, is they take away our abilities to believe in ourselves as individuals capable of making change for ourselves, our family, our communities. We give ourselves up to a mass movement. That's how these guys operate. Our job is to reinstill that belief in the self and in the individual. That, dude, whatever you're going to do, the person who can make the most impact in your life is not that bunch of people. You know, it's not that mosque or not that priest or not this or not that politician. It's you. And the fact that we can take them through that short process of just 2 hours on the first day, and then the next day they make more money, that's it, they're sold. That's the key thing for us. And that's one of the things, like, you know, again, it's bringing agile values to life. It's about delivering value often and every day, in this case. So every day we want to deliver value because we don't have 2 week sprints. We literally we treat it like one sprint is 1 day. 5 sprints, we run in 5 days. And we have to make sure that they get value out of it at the end of each sprint. And that's how you reinstill that individualism, that self-belief, that then detaches them, you know, not completely, but somewhat, from that mass movement, whatever that is. Why? Because suddenly they are in control. They can see that they can affect change themselves, and they can do so legally, without putting their family in harm's way, without starting a riot, without anything else, without the need for this organization. And then that's the breakaway point, where they can either decide that they're still sympathetic to it, or decide that I don't want anything to do with it. And in the majority of cases that we've worked with from the 683, they don't want anything to do with it. Why? They don't have time. Hey, we're busy people, we don't have time for these things, do we? We occasionally make time to go and protest. You know? Likewise, we want to get them in a similar place where they only go and protest for the things that really, really matter, as opposed to protesting every day because some mass movement asks you to do so. Please.
Another question, in fact. So here you mentioned trying to raise money from other companies, basically, but did you try to look at raising money through crowdsourcing or really getting money from the community, from individuals?
Yeah. So individuals, I hit up whenever I meet the individuals. Crowdsourcing, we haven't really tried it. But for our graphic novel, that is something I want to do, is to try and crowdsource it, because it seems like something that can be crowdsourced. Yeah, but mostly it's funded by individuals. I call it personal contribution, friends, family, and fools. Biggest fool being me. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thanks for your time.